Hey there. Thank you so much for clicking and giving me a chance. And you're going to notice this is not a fancy video, mostly because I identify as analog American. And secondly, because I'm sort of making this on the fly, but it's based on something that I was thinking about just a bit ago while elbows deep in my tomato plants in the garden, and which I'm going to apologize about my disheveled appearance here, but I kind of thought I'd go in and make this while I was still thinking about it. And yes, I was actually thinking about Pride and Prejudice and Mary Bennet while out in my garden just because it was something to think about. But I've been going over this whole trend that has been going on lately about Mary being recast as this sweet, misunderstood intellectual genius in the Bennet family, when the truth is, no, that is not the case at all. Mary is neither good nor bad, but the entire point is she's another foil for the Bennet sisters and really the Bennet parents as well. But she's also kind of a silly teenage girl stereotype. And not just that, she's a know it all. She's a silly, arrogant know it all. And if you look at the Bennet family, you would realize that she has a lot in common with her father. She doesn't ever really want to go outside. She doesn't want to mix with the world. She just wants to sit and read big books and act like she's got big brain ideas from it. She's also a bit of a know-it-all, like her older sister, Elizabeth Bennet. Yeah, Elizabeth, it's not very popular to talk about, but yeah, the entire point of Elizabeth's character arc, as well as her eventual husband, Fitzwilliam Darcy, that's not even a spoiler alert, so don't get on me there. But anyways, the entire point of their character arc is that they get over their pride and their prejudice and the fact that they think they know everything that is going on, and they learn to be better people and wind up with their perfect matches in the end. Mary Bennet, on the other hand, is the intellectual ditz version of her boy crazy ditz sister Lydia. And how do I know this? Where do I pull this out? Well, okay. We're so eager to put modern girl boss context onto Mary when the truth is we need to remove our adult trappings from her and just look at her in the context of the fact that, yes, the Bennet girls are all under the age of roughly 23 years old. So it's Jane's like 22, 23. Elizabeth is 20, 21. And then Mary being next would probably be 18, 19 maybe, 17. And then Lydia, who is 15 when the novel starts. Okay? So number one, we're going to put it in this context. And then I'm going to read straight from the source itself to kind of give you an idea of why exactly Mary's not a misunderstood genius. And also something really interesting I've seen, she's also not even the least favorite, actually. If anything, it's pointed out that Elizabeth is Mrs. Bennet's least favorite, and Mr. Bennet doesn't particularly like Lydia even before Lydia goes and gets in trouble. So Mary's just kind of there. She's just kind of doing her thing and keeping under the radar, if anything. So let's start where we first actually hear Mary talk. When we first meet Mary, it's kind of a freebie because Mr. Bennet's actually taking a pot shot at her. He asks her a question, she freezes, and he's just like, while you're gathering your little big brain ideas, let's move on. But the first time we hear Mary Bennet talk, you ready? Pride, observed Mary, who piqued herself upon the solidity of her reflections, is a very common failing, I believe. By all that I have ever read, I am convinced that it is very common indeed, that human nature is particularly prone to it, and that there are very few of us who do not cherish a feeling of self-complacency on the score of some quality or another, real or imaginary. Vanity and pride are different things, though the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves, vanity to what we would have others think of us. I don't know what they called word salad back in Jane Austen's day, but that literally was just word salad. And Mary said a whole lot of nothing. And in fact, it's very funny. She was being very vain while talking about vanity. That is our first impression of Mary, and first impressions do actually matter in this novel. That's why it was originally titled First Impressions. But anyways, so that's our first impression of Mary, right? And it kind of goes on where we find out, obviously, in the sympathetic vein, that she's trying hard to be this like musician and accomplished one in the family. And when when the Bennet sisters are asked to perform, well, Elizabeth in particular, Mary's the next one up because she wants to show off. And we see this. Mary had neither genius nor taste, and though vanity had given her application, it had given her likewise a pedantic air and conceited manner, which would have injured a higher degree of of course, might be a coin turn, higher degree of excellence than she had reached. Elizabeth, easy and unaffected, had been listened to with much more pleasure, though not playing half so well. Mary, at the end of a long concerto, was glad to purchase praise and gratitude by Scotch and Irish airs at the request of her younger sisters, who, with some of the Lucases and 2 or 3 of the officers, joined eagerly in dancing at one end of the room. All right, I'm going to do this a quick and dirty, modern take on this, but it's literally... They asked Mary to change the playlist from her boring indie prog rock to something people can actually dance to. So, put on Taylor Swift, that kind of thing. She's so eager to be seen as accomplished that she doesn't realize she's being vain doing it. It's neither good nor bad. It's just how Jane Austen wrote her. Mary, we see her next when Elizabeth and Jane get back from the Bingleys with all of that going on. They found Mary, as usual, deep in the study of thorough bass and human nature, and had some new extracts to admire, some new observations of threadbare morality to listen to. Thorough bass is just music. It's actually really just harmony. So she's technically studying music theory, but all she had to say was, I was just practicing. I was just studying my scales. I was just studying my chords. That's literally all it was. Now, here's a fun one, kind of related to that fan fiction BBC series and the fan fiction book that got published that kind of recast Mary in a different light. It's really popular to say, oh, Mary had a crush on Mr. Collins. She would have been perfect for Mr. Collins. Wait, right there. So Mary might have been prevailed on to accept him. Of course, him being Mr. Collins. They don't know at this point. He's kind of secretly down low engaged to Charlotte Lucas. She rated his abilities much higher than any of the others being the Bennet girls, of course. There was a solidity in his reflections which often struck her. And though by no means so clever as herself, she thought that if encouraged to read and improve himself by such an example as hers, he might become a very agreeable companion. Mary thinks she's smarter than Mr. Collins. She thinks she's smarter than a lot of people, but she thinks she's smarter than Mr. Collins, and she wants to make him a fixer-upper project. To be fair, Charlotte Lucas also kind of treats him the same way. The difference being, Charlotte Lucas has the age and maturity and experience to be able to properly manage Mr. Collins, whereas Mary would just turn him into another version of herself. She'd probably try to put herself above him in terms of intellectual level, and they would just be absolutely insufferable as a couple. Mary does not have the intellectual or emotional maturity to be able to manage a man like Mr. Collins. That's honestly kind of what makes Charlotte Lucas so intriguing, is that she knows what she's getting into in the marriage, and she doesn't treat him as a buffoon necessarily, just someone to kind of just keep tempered and keep well managed, and that makes him a better human being. Mary would not have been a good match at all for Mr. Collins. Now, here's another fun one. Let's talk about the relationship between Mary and Lydia. I just pointed out a little bit earlier that they're actually 2 sides of the same coin, where they're both a bit ditzy, just in different avenues, where Mary thinks she's so deep that she comes off incredibly shallow, and Lydia's just straight boy crazy with no other interest in her life, and poor kitties just kind of follow along with Lydia. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and read this little exchange between Mary and Lydia that they have after Jane and Elizabeth return from their respective trips, and they come back from London with Kitty and Lydia in tow, as for fun. So, oh, Mary, this is Lydia talking. I wish you had gone with us, for we had such fun. As we went along, Kitty and me drew up all the blinds and pretended there was nobody in the coach, and I should have gone all the way if Kitty had not been sick. And when we got to the George, I do believe we behaved very handsomely, for we treated the other 3 to the nicest cold luncheon in the world, and if you had gone, we would have treated you too. And when we came away, it was such fun. I thought we should never have got into the coach. I was ready to die of laughter, and then we were all so merry all the way home. We talked and laughed so loud that anybody might have heard us 10 miles off. To this, Mary very gravely replied, Far be it from me, my dear sister, to depreciate such pleasures. They would doubtless be congenial with the generality of female minds, but I confess they have no charms for me. I should infinitely prefer a book. Lydia literally just zinged Mary for never leaving the house. And Mary just zinged Lydia back, basically calling her a ditz and going, I'm not like other girls. I'm a little too intellectual for those feminine pleasures. They're actually kind of being pretty catty with each other on that. But again, Lydia doesn't even listen to Mary, and Mary's probably just really annoyed that Lydia bothered her in the first place. But yeah, there's nothing really deeper than a couple of sisters being catty. And that's not even psychology. That's sisterology. You know how that goes. All right, now after Lydia gets in trouble, we see Mary again coming up to Elizabeth, and well, this is what she has to say. This is a most unfortunate affair, and will probably be much talked of. But we must stem the tide of malice and pour into the wounded bosoms of each other the balm of sisterly consolation. Then perceiving in Elizabeth no inclination of replying, she added, unhappy as the event must be for Lydia, we may draw from it this useful lesson, that loss of virtue in a female is irretrievable, that one false step involves her in endless ruin, that her reputation is no less brittle than it is beautiful, and that she cannot be too guarded in her behavior towards the undeserving of the other sex. Elizabeth lifted up her eyes in amazement, but was too much oppressed to make any reply. Mary, however, continued to console herself with such kind of moral extractions from the evil before them. Okay, break this down, and this is going to be of a hot take, but hear me out. I've already pointed out that Lydia and Mary are a little bit catty toward each other, and I'm not saying that Mary isn't concerned, but I am pointing out that what Mary is saying in modern context would be, sucks to be Lydia. Like that entire last point is going, yeah, look what Lydia got herself into. And it was kind of a really stupid point of her to say, well, I guess people might be talking about this. Yeah, actually, this is the Bennet girls' reputations completely demolished because their sister acted in this manner. And that's part of why Elizabeth is like, what the heck? That's actually when she lifts up her eyes in amazement. Like it's literally A, that's your sister, and B, this is our reputations on the line that just all got completely shot. And Mary's just off on her way going, well, let's be deep and let's be, she actually, if you think about it, she kind of just treats Mary or Lydia with the same kind of attitude that Mr. Collins treated Lydia, where they both just completely wrote her off like, well, sucks to be that 16 and pregnant contestant right there. I mean, that's literally her attitude towards that. She's not, like I said, a particularly good person. She's neither good, she's neither bad. She's really written as a foolish character, just like Mrs. Bennet, just like Lydia Bennet, just like Kitty Bennet, just like pretty much the entire neighborhood in Merrington. And while you can argue that a lot of it is through Elizabeth's point of view, the novel is third person omniscient, which means that the narrator is really the one who you see through, although Elizabeth is the main viewpoint. So you can kind of see a little bit of her coloring the way she looks at everyone else, but this is the way everyone is. And that is the beauty of Jane Austen's novels, is that while the heroes and heroines have their own character arcs and they visibly, markedly improve themselves and actually get their happy ending, most people stay the same. I mean, and that's just the way it is in real life, where most people, once they develop, remain static. They don't ever do a lot to truly change their lives once the personalities have like solidified themselves. And I'm not saying Mary will necessarily get better, but we find out at the end that Mary, like many people, doesn't really change. Neither does Miss Bennet. Mrs. Bennet still remains very silly. Neither does Lydia Bennet. Lydia doesn't learn anything from the trouble that she got into. She just falls out of love with Wickham, but continues to go on with life. In fact, the gold star sister that we actually should be giving kudos to is truly Kitty Bennet here, because she's the one that, after Mr. Bennet learned his lesson and made sure that Kitty Bennet was never going to hang out with Lydia ever again so that he didn't have to deal with another situation like that, he actually makes sure that Kitty gets to hang out with Elizabeth and Jane in much better company. And it's said that she actually improves hugely. Mary, on the other hand, this is what Jane Austen wrote of her in the very last chapter, where she's given the recap and the epilogue for everyone's lives. Mary was the only daughter who remained at home, and she was necessarily drawn from the pursuit of accomplishments by Mrs. Bennet's being quite unable to sit alone. Mary was obliged to mix more with the world, but she could still moralize over every morning visit. And as she was no longer mortified by comparisons between her sister's beauty and her own, it was suspected by her father that she submitted to the change without much reluctance. So there is an improvement in Mary's situation in that she no longer has to deal with the constant comparisons to her sisters, and she doesn't have to show herself up. But at the same time, Mary doesn't really change her personality. She doesn't really become any less insufferable than she already was. And as it turns out, I'm actually reading this particular version I'm using is an annotated version. And the gentleman who created this gave a lot of really cool context and history and background to the novel, which actually enhances the reading. But Jane Austen actually wrote to her family what the fates of the people past the novel was. And to go with this passage, the footnote goes, according to a later memoir by her nephew, Jane Austen did reveal her vision of the future fates of Kitty and Mary. Lady Bennet was satisfactorily married to a clergyman near Pemberley, while Mary obtained nothing higher than one of her Uncle Philip's clerks and was content to be considered a star in the society of Maryston. In other words, Mary was a big fish in a small pond, and that suited her perfectly. Again, it's not good. It's not bad. Mary doesn't have necessarily the best qualities, but she's not an evil human being. She's not a bad human being. She's just a human being. And that's, again, the beauty of Austen's writing. Yes, people do have improved, but there's a lot of people like Mary and Lydia and Mrs. Bennet who just normie their way through life. That's how it is. Again, with Kitty, I do want to point out that given how Mr. Darcy is so very involved in the neighborhood around Pemberley, the fact that Kitty marries a clergyman who is at Pemberley says a lot about the self-improvement that she goes through, because you know that Darcy would probably have a say in who the clergymen are married and marrying in his neighborhood in the same way that Mr. Collins was very concerned about who he married because of his patroness, Lady Catherine de BUUUUURRRR. Lady Catherine de BUUUUURRR. I don't know. I got tongue twisted on that. But anyways, so gold star to Kitty Bennet, okay? And nothing against Mary Bennet, but let's stop making her into this sweet intellectual genius when the truth is she's a teenage girl, just like I was a teenage girl. Most of you probably watching are teenage girls at one point. She needed to improve. She was very silly. And at the end of the day, she was pretty much harmless, but just another tertiary character in a Jane Austen novel. There's nothing good and there's nothing bad. It just is what it is. But her her arc really is part of just what makes this such a beautiful novel and why it is my favorite novel. It's just very human and very wonderful and relatable at the end of the day. You see a little bit of all of these characters and everyone you meet. And I'm not here to knock the people who have been putting this modern context on Mary. I'm just saying you've got to get Jane Austen a little more credit and maybe look to the fact that there are other better characters to focus on and who have improved themselves and have far better character arcs than Mary. Okay? So that said, thank you so much if you made it this far. As far as me, I shall be wrapping this up as my dogs have been clearly wanting me this half hour. But I hope you got something out of it. And if you have some thoughts, like, put them down there. I love to read them. I'd love to see some feedback and thoughts on what you think of this. And even if you don't agree with me, let me know why. I can take it. So that said, yes, I know. Anyways, that said, thank you so much. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day. And I hope you, if you have not read Pride and Prejudice yet, pick it up and do it. And if you've read it, pick it up and read it. Okay. Have a lovely one. God bless.